Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cowboy Bebop, the Power On edition.
Why you just keep flip-flopping this? Is like...
You gotta keep it mixed, you gotta mash it up. Gotta be, I don't know.
Power
Gotta have
Bop
fun.
On edition.
Yeah,
Bebop. Cow.
Beep, beep. Moo, the Moo edition. But yeah, you gotta, yeah. Anyways, hi, I am one of your hosts who doesn't know anything. Taylor, how's it going? And with me is my co-host, my cohort, my co-conspirator, Sushi B. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. You ready to include the final member here, the Bebop?
Yepers. That is the goal for today with episode 9, Jammin' with Edward. Now, question. From it could change over time or whatnot. What are your impressions of Edward?
Well, I was going to ask you kind of off the bat, too.
Okay.
It still seems like Edward is probably, by a big stretch, the least liked member of the crew.
There's a strong subset of people who do really like Ed a lot.
As their favorite, like, crew member, though?
I would say,
part of the team?
I think there's a sneaky amount of people who do.
Okay.
And maybe, like, I don't know. I think most people probably skew towards Spike.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say it might go Spike, Ed, and then it's a toss-up between Faye and Jet.
Okay. I could see Jet being last for a lot of people.
Which is unfortunate, but, you know, Jet's my boy. Jet's my favorite. So.
But to answer your question, I know the first time I watched the show, this episode, I didn't really know what to think. I was just like, oh, this seems really bizarre. Like, this character is, like, so bizarre. The other three are so, there's at least some commonality between them, right? Like, you can see there's some kind of history that's brought them to be the people they are now, whereas Ed is so much more innocent still, and just so, like, zany. I can't think of another word that explains Edward than zany. And they're not in that way at all. Right? They're so much more callous, or like they can't be bothered with that kind of behavior.
Right.
So I just remember Ed just being very odd to me to be a part of the crew, but I would assume the intention here is to add that bit of levity, add that bit of playfulness and fun that the other characters have, but you know, their humor is a lot more irony, a lot more sarcasm. This is just that total wrecking ball of craziness, basically, in the show and on their lives. Over time, Ed is probably my least favorite of the group.
Okay.
But I don't hate the character. I also found that, I can't remember as we're going to go forward, I don't remember Ed being quite as prevalent as the other three all the way through. But I have to see these episodes to really get that sense whether I'm right or wrong.
I mean, like the two-parter, she's in it for a very minimal amount. Like, she just pops in when she needs to, kind of thing. And then, like you said, adding in that levity here and there. And then, of course, the feature episode with her is kind of like that shining example on a larger scale with the series itself, right? I would say probably... Do it.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're good, go.
I was just going to say, like, I remember one of my favorite episodes, Ed is the main character with Ein.
Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite episodes. It's not coming up for
Right.
a while,
Right. Yeah.
but this is even though I'm saying Ed is like my least favorite character, Ed is also probably in one of my favorite episodes. So there's the lead.
Yeah. I honestly used to despise Ed. Not that I didn't get it. It was kind of, it felt like it was mucking up my cool little view time of being a super serious, dour, mature adult.
Yeah.
As,
At 19?
teenager watching this stuff. Well, not even 19. Yeah, I watched
Okay.
it when I was like 16.
Okay.
16, 15, 16, 17, around there.
Yeah.
This is keeping me away from being one of the cool adults. And
while watching this alone in your basement.
Yes.
And having no one to talk to about this show.
And no, I had friends
Okay.
who talked to me about this. Thank you very much. Best friend from high school.
Yeah.
This is how we bonded.
As you handcrafted your Spike Spiegel suit to wear this goes.
As I wrote fan fiction of Spike living and everything being great, like it's just it just Ed rubbed me the wrong way, and it was because I didn't really understand having that levity and enjoying the valleys and the peaks and having this texture of just this sort of difference to really enjoy it, kind of thing. I wouldn't say Ed's really moved up in the sense of like outside of Jet, the other three are just there with each other, and Spike has slowly gotten more and more on my nerves as I've gotten older. But Ed is, I've softened much more on Ed as time has moved on, kind of thing. So
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, Ed, this is a rather odd episode in a way. I mean, it makes sense because Ed is introduced, but I mean more so the whole like format and focus of the episode feels just it feels like it's a part of this series, but there's just something about it that's just kind of weird, and I guess it's because of the bounty, which is HAL 9000. I guess
it's a satellite. It's lonely.
but it keeps showing like the lens. It's just like I think it's supposed to be HAL 9000.
I can't let you do that, Dave.
Yeah. Well, even the voice is very similar, right?
Lonely.
Yeah.
So lonely.
Ed, it's nice to see you again.
Friend.
While Ed is, high pitched. MPU.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's bizarre because there's this kind of it feels like it wants to hook on to some very creepy aspects of like sci-fi and everything, but then it pulls it back real quick because of it being this more Edward focused in a way, or just kind of like discovery of Edward episode. And this also is the first episode to be very prominent with Earth. And you see the cataclysm that has wrought horrific damage to the planet. And, kind of what I was saying in the previous episode, like there is a very heavy scarring of like identity throughout humanity, and humans on Earth are seen as these weirdos to everybody else in the solar system, and I like that kind of touch because it's almost like it's kind of similar to the diaspora of if you live in a small town or something, especially nowadays and stuff, and then you don't go out and like quote unquote try to make yourself or, make a name for yourself and go to bigger and better things, quote unquote.
The big city
Um,
lights.
right. Yeah. Everybody else who goes out, like, kind of look back and you're like, oh, why are you still here, you weirdo? Like, what are you doing? I know that's not everybody, but, I grew up in various different places, but my high school years, I grew up in a very small, like, school and like, out in rural land, we'll say. And there is that vibe of the they stayed there. What a bunch of yokels, and that's not fair to them. Um, however, with Earthlings in this setting, it is kind of like you see how shattered they are. There's just not a strong identity of any sort. They're just like they've got picos, and it isn't until we get to Wild Horses really that we get a little bit stronger kind of identity. But it's partially because of just the two characters involved, and mainly I think his name's Miles, Doohan's assistant, which we get into later, just being like about baseball, right? It's not a lot of strong sports throughout the show, and that's kind of one that really pings off baseball and Doohan's racing. But like the all the Earthlings have these wild stories to tell about who Edward is,
right?
Like it's just it's just a very shattered,
tall basketball player.
Yeah, Hindu guru,
right.
Alien, and drag queen kind of thing. It's just like they just it's like they just they've lost touch with everything, and so anything that they can grasp a hold of is a reality.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of pointing that all out, because of they've become accustomed as well, I think, to just that's what's left is all that's ever going to be, and that they're probably never going to get off the planet. And I kind of wonder, are they aware of, like, do some of the people there have any idea of what the galaxy could be like? Or are they still so sheltered, from the idea that I think they know that nobody flinches when Jet lands, right? Like, you don't see people like racing over to his shuttle or anything like that.
Right.
But they also don't like cower from, like, a stranger, right? Because
let me touch the hem of your gown.
Yeah, well, and obviously, like, it's not like he looks like he's got like a third eye or something, right, from living out in space,
right?
Living in another galaxy and what have you. And obviously, the people that live in those are descendants from Earth at some point, however many generations have passed at this time. But yeah, it is interesting to see that the Earth has come under all of the I guess, destruction from the asteroids and everything else, and not really ever been able to recover in any fashion, right? They're just like, oh, well, this decrepit building is falling apart. Well, we'll just live in the part that's still somewhat salvageable, rather than, why don't we fix it up? It's just, no, we'll make do.
Yeah, well, it's kind of reflecting of, like, the people who would make do with things when Rome collapsed, or when Rome receded away from, like, Britain, and the Goths sacked Rome and everything. Eventually, you kind of get to this point, and you can even, you can see this with ancient Mesopotamia, where they have these giant ziggurats and the massive city walls that were talked about in Anabasis, the story of, like, the Greek mercenaries going and visiting and going, what are these things? These things are massive, and people squatting in them going, people used to live here. I don't know. This is where we live. And you're just like, what? What? Xenophon's completely confused. But I mean, just, yeah, it's just in the wreckage of that sort of decimation. That's how they continue on, right? But it's like they just instead of trying to, I guess, trying to go beyond where they're at, they're just fine with, taking the hit and just sort of staying on the mat for now.
Right.
Just like,
Yeah. I think some of these other positives here. There's a lot of snappy dialogue in this episode.
Yeah,
like we've had previous Jet and Faye dialogue.
Yeah, I love that, going back and forth.
I don't think Spike and Faye have some good lines between each other and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But Faye almost she almost backs off of Spike a little bit more, almost like, I wouldn't say fearful of him, but I think she's a little more like he's a bit more unpredictable and a little bit more wild, right? Like as we see later on, where Jet basically says, yeah, we have zero chance of this ever working. Like, this is absolutely impossible. And he's like, well, I'll take those odds, right? Like he's a bit of a loose cannon and crazy. But with Jet, you kind of know that he's going to plant, himself down and be like, all right, he's the tank, right? He's the tank of said strategy RPG, and he's going to take all the punishment, and he'll give it back, but he's not going to do some crazed kamikaze last ditch effort or whatever. So I think Faye knows that she can kind of pick on him a little bit.
Right.
And that it's easier to get under his skin, whereas Spike will just totally say something way worse back to her and brush her off.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that a lot of the dialogue between the main crew members is quite fun in this episode.
Right, because we get another little nod, wink about Faye's character. With Jet and Faye, can't tell a woman's age by looking, and then she's like, nor can you tell what to do just by looking. And he's like, same as a snake. And this, also is a nice hint at what's to come with Jet's character next episode, right? This is, which has not really been, there's been these couple little drops about him being former officer and all this sort of stuff, and beyond that, not really much. And this sort of really alludes to his character, and it's a very sneaky way to do that, right? Like, It's like, oh, okay, clever, very clever to think that out.
Did you have any favorite quotes besides like the one you just said there? Or?
You mentioned the one about the, where he's like, it's like playing baseball without a bat. I like that one. And then the one between Jet and Spike, where Jet's like, I'm not the type to be led around by a woman. And then Spike's, well, or she says something, and then he's like, he said, I don't remember exactly what Spike says.
He says something like, you'll just have to lead her.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm less of a type to do that. And then Faye pops in, and she's like, well, 8 is easier to divide by 2 than 3. And I'm like, it's just, like you said, really just good, strong stuff from them all around.
Snappy. Yeah, I like the one that Faye says too when, he says, what does Spike say? Something like, oh, hackers are a waste of time, right? They're not even
they're boring.
Yeah, they're boring. They're not even worth the hunt, kind of thing. And
which
hackers are nerdy, pasty, tubby little geeks with triple thick glasses, and this one is probably a demented otaku with smelly feet, so catching him will be a breeze.
Shots fired.
Yeah.
She has that other one at the end too, where she's like, some promises are made to be broken. In fact, most of them.
Oh yeah, she's like screaming at Jet. And And I like how, what does Ed say there? Ed says something that's kind of funny.
Not coming for Ed. Ooh,
not coming for Ed. Near.
Right.
They're just lucky she didn't, crash them the way she crashed the police vehicle.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some good like back and forth definitely in this episode.
And you have the Alex Jones ripoff of the Yuri Kellerman. Who talks like he has that like, yes.
Oh yeah.
The aliens. The government's searching for them my whole life.
Sounds a bit like Ren from Ren and Stimpy as well.
Stimpy, you idiot.
Yeah. Yeah, I forgot about that character in this one, yeah.
And it just highlights that daytime television is bad for you.
Yeah. It's another conspiracy theorist, right? Which seems to be even more of a thing than ever, right? Well, not just because you can fall into so many traps and things that can kind of twist your memory or mind on things now of just falling to the internet, right? So you can get so many opinions and ideas now. The Nazca line thing is interesting as well, and kind of going back to what you said earlier about like the Earthlings, right, and this CPU for lack of a better word, trying to restore something that used to be basically restoring a norm or bringing back a sense of maybe you can find the word that I can't find right now.
Of what used to be, like I mentioned in the previous episode as well, right? Is that there's, like, even with the CPU, it is trying to reclaim the past as if you can do that, and that's not.
It's discomfort that's no longer there.
Yeah, that's. Like I've mentioned it in other things, but like I think I mentioned it in a previous episode a couple back, like this Weltschmerz. I know butchering the word of that, but that just world weariness of just this lethargy that just can't really just the malaise is, former President Jimmy Carter said, there's a malaise that's over the country kind of thing. It's just this malaise, this apathy that is baked into the characters as well as into not all of the characters, nor all of the peoples, but just partially because every time they try to do something to get out of it, even if it's illegal or not, there's just this beat down of like, look at just even trying to get bounties that they're failing all the time. There's all this failure and, failure mounted on failure, plus this just apathy has really just kind of sunk the spirit of a lot of people. And then you have a character like Edward who comes crashing in here who's just doesn't really have anything to kind of latch on to in the sense of outside of, being abandoned by a parent, but just kind of going with it and be like, it is what it is. This is what it is.
Right.
I'm going to go with it. And, and then everybody else still like desperately trying to catch on to that and just like, no, need something from the past. I need to, this has got to get fixed. I got to have it. And it's,
yeah. And then the enigma that Edward is interesting because, correct me if I'm wrong, later we don't get any sense of Edward's past, do we?
Like the very last episode that she's in.
Okay, because and I can't remember that now, so I guess I'll get to that point.
Yeah.
Oh, been probably like 8 years since I watched all of these or something.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
A long time now.
I watch it every time I move. It's one of my
mentioning
little.
that. So.
Yeah, and one of my little things I do. It's like, oh, new place. I gotta break in the new place by christening it with some Cowboy Bebop.
But just like we don't get any idea really at all of what Ed really is, right? Like we're just okay. This person can hack into any computer or device basically, but other than that, how is this person alive? Like, did they eat? Like, it doesn't seem like it. Like, how are they sustaining their well-being in right. some fashion? But then you're like, well, then they're mentally, Ed seems kind of unhinged, right? So, but somehow seeing the bright side of life by having no social supports.
Well, I wouldn't say like no limited social supports, but just so carefree to a fault, where it's like and it's like a coping mechanism, right? They're being like she's being so carefree that or just what have you until her episode, like that last episode with her comes about. But there is a waywardness, but it's a waywardness because there is no purpose. The others their purpose is trying to reclaim something that is unobtainable with the past, or even just like trying to reconcile the past in some sort of way. Where hers, it's just a waywardness and just kind of go with the flow. And while that's is something that it's a balance that they all need to learn from each other, is that to try to find that purpose, and that is where each character's very specific episodes tries to lead them, right? So
yep. I like the like there's the whole sequence once the other satellites get online, and just sort of the animation of flying through and like the lasers cutting through other asteroids and so forth. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I like the point where Ed radios a jet and it's like, oh yeah, you just need to get close to the satellite. Just use Faye as a decoy.
Yeah.
And then Spike's like, thanks, Faye.
Yeah. And they certainly take a few out. Banter. Yeah, they do certainly shoot a few down, but obviously not all of them. But yeah, no, that's pretty funny.
A nice banter. I like where Jet goes on the beat to try to drum up answers, because it's the first time we really get to see him doing that as well. On a good, like, more, like, because Spike is taking this disinterested approach where he's just like, not my type of thing. Right. And it's like it finally gives Faye and Jet a little bit more to work with.
Yep. Yeah, I like that animation, just showing his footsteps, right? Crossing constantly, kind of searching and getting all these ridiculous answers. And he came back to them and said something. Edward is a 7-foot tall basketball player who's an alien who has a potato for a neck and like whatever he says, right? All this nonsense, just squishes it all together and just, well, that's apparently what Edward is.
Right, that, like, I think right before he goes down to Earth and stuff, he's just like, nothing good. Like, Spike's like, oh yeah, don't forget to bring me a souvenir. Good. And he's like, yeah, nothing good comes from the Earth anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just so, just a lot of disdain for it.
I think there was something similar in Alien Resurrection, which was like the 4th Alien movie. I seem to remember something similar where they were saying the same thing, right? Like that Earth had turned kind of similar to this, maybe even worse. They were implying, and they say a similar line. I think it's Ron Perlman says something, like Earth is a total dump now, or something like that. I'd never go back there, or something similar. So it's Oh, yeah, maybe that is kind of a bit of a trope for some sci-fi.
Oh, it's a pretty strong trope of like wreck your home planet, yet you go expand
You
outward.
find something else, yeah.
Right, and it's like, well, you couldn't even take care of the planet you couldn't you couldn't even take care of your home.
Right.
So you had to go out to try to learn so you could come back and take care of your home. What's wrong with you?
Or just even worse, don't even do that. Just go take another planet for your
Right. Well, yeah, and the other trope of basically it getting lost, losing your home, and then trying to rediscover it and stuff. Zeno Saga goes into that. The Isaac Asimov Foundation series goes into that, which is it's got some really neat ties towards the very end of the timeline of that book series. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to have that disdain for home. Just because I think there are a lot of people that could probably feel that way, especially if they bounce out and then they look inward. But it's it's almost like a way of trying to divorce yourself from what once was, and it's kind of a very interesting look into somebody's potential psychic evaluation of them and stuff.
I think that's all I got for this. I will say, I think I can put it in the middle. There is the weird sort of is that a cheap? Is that called a cheap? That little,
the little Pico.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like the Peeps.
Peeps.
The little
Sorry.
Peeps.
Okay. Peeps.
Yeah. The little marshmallow birds.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like a peep. Yeah. Gross. Peeps are gross. See a box of them, and it's like, Peeps since 1873, and it's like, yeah, these are probably the same ones from 1873.
Probably. I've heard some stories about those things.
Oh, I mean, some people absolutely adore them. You can have my share.
And then and the rest.
And about 100,000 bajillion other people.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This episode, it's another one of those where the bounty isn't necessarily the strong point, or at least a strong focal point. Even though it does have these interesting similarities to certain things, kind of pointed out. I used to really dislike this episode, and I've warmed up to it a bit, but I'm still there's just something I'm just kind of it's very ho-hum to me. I'm like, okay. Like, even though it has these things in it and stuff that I like, it just doesn't move the needle much for me for some reason. I'm not 100% certain why.
I'm very much in the same category as you with that. I don't hate the episode, but there's just something that just seems a little bit dull about it, other than some of that dialogue between the already existing crew members. But again, I don't hate Ed, and just kind of like, I'm slightly indifferent to the character to some degree. It's like, okay, like, I know Ed comes up later on, like in the one, was it the chess episode or whatever, where she's playing like virtual chess or whatever, and has, moments here and there, but we didn't even say the bounty, which was 8 million. Is that
correct?
So it's 8 million, and that they lose the bounty because it's of not organic nature.
Right.
We get Big Shot back. I hadn't seen Big Shot in a while. I don't even know when is the last time we saw Big Shot. Is it like episode 3 or 4?
No, it popped up in. Did it pop up in 7 with Heavy Metal Queen?
No. It was not in
No.
Mononoke.
Then it would have been. I'm trying to think if it would have been with episode 6 with Speak for the Devil. Or Sympathy for the Devil. I'm trying to think if it was in there.
I can't remember. No, I don't think so, because that one was. Jet was explaining the bounty on that one, right? With what were the two guys' names?
Giraffe and Zebra.
Thank you, Giraffe and Zebra. I don't think that one had Big Shot.
So
it must have been like
did
4.
have it in 5. I thought I had it in 5. I thought Ballad of Fallen Angels had it in there.
Did it? Maybe it did. I don't know. Anyways, it's been a little bit of it's been a few episodes at least. Since we've had that. And it's funny that it's at the end of the episode this time rather than a bit earlier on.
Right.
And it doesn't really give you a bounty rather than give you an update about a bounty.
Yeah, just to kind of...
Which is a bit refreshing, right? Rather than just constantly telling you bounties and stuff. So.
Yeah, just kind of get kicked in the gut.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah. Anything else you want to add before we...
No, I think I'm ready to give this a score.
All right. 8 million. Where are we sitting?
I don't know. You always make me go first.
You're bouncing this back to me? Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't mind going first.
I'll go first on this one. We'll start with episode 10. Maybe you can pick up the slack for some. At 8 million, hey? If I were rewatching the entire series, and if you just showed me the clip of the argument between like Faye and Jet, and with Spike, throwing in his little quips here and there, I'd be almost fine with that. Just being like, okay, fine. Oh yeah, I kind of remember this episode, sort of. So I probably go with like a 5 million bounty.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to go below. Like you said, there's just some element that just doesn't quite work for me. But I don't hate this episode. It's just kind of like, yeah, it's fine. And it's nice to introduce Ed and bring Ed in, since like it's obviously going to be at some point, and it's interesting to have Ed sort of do some things that are kind of quirky and show the abilities that Ed has.
Right.
And that they lose the bounty, but not because of Ed. Like they should have gotten the bounty. That the reason Ed ends up on board and stuff is like Ed obviously has something that she can contribute to them, and then I know she kind of blackmails them to take her on board, but
yeah, they lose the bounty due to legalese.
Yeah, like they don't lose it because of Ed's negligence or something, at least.
Right. So, I'd give it a 7 million. It's not. Kind of similar. Like I don't hate it or anything. It's a good episode. It's just not. Unfortunately for me, and it's kind of tipping my cap a little bit. It's sandwiched between 2 really good episodes, and I just don't think it quite hits the same level as those 2, which rightly or wrongly, that it just depresses it a little bit. So yeah, that's where I would sit with it.
Okay, sounds good.
So yeah, any last words before we see off on this episode?
No, I am ready to close up shop.
All right, so all you Edward fans, please direct your hate towards us, especially Sushi B, since he gave it a lower score.
But you've had the longer hate for Ed than I have, so.
Oh, hey, now I said I came around. Anyways, yeah, I'm curious to hear more people's proclamations of how much they love Ed's character and stuff. Because, like I said, I think there is a very strong, and maybe it's just that's what it is. There's a strong vocal subset of fans for Edward. But yeah, I really think that she might be second favorite of the lot. So yeah, let us know. And that's it for Sushi Be myself. So see you, Space Cowboy.